Vacationing in the time of Corona. That's what was required in the summer of 2020. We had two goals: do something socially distanced and get out of the damned Kansas humidity. So we loaded up the car with our new roof box and headed down the Santa Fe Trail. We would camp all but one night, do a lot of hiking, and live with the fact that our experience visiting breweries would be less than optimal. And by driving, we would also be avoiding people except at gas stations. So a quick overview of the route. All of the major pioneer trails started in the Kansas City area, following the same route until they got to a place called the Parting of the Trails in what is now Gardner, Kansas. From there, the Santa Fe Trail separated from the Oregon and California trails, snaking southwesterly through Kansas and eventually finishing in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Since we had visited most of the trail sites in the eastern half of Kansas at various times before this trip, we were going to skip over everything until we got to Dodge City. There we stopped at our first of 14 breweries on the trip. They had socially distanced seating and, for the most part, people wore masks when they weren't seated. Flights were the order of choice for us throughout the trip, which were good ways to sample a variety of beers responsibly. Then we moved on to our first real trail site in Cimarron, Kansas. Cimarron Crossing was a place where pioneers chose to follow the Arkansas River into Colorado along the mountain route or to follow the shorter but drier and more dangerous Cimarron Cutoff. There's a monument and a sign at the site, and right next to it is the place where travelers would cross the river if they were doing the cutoff. Anyone trying to cross the river today would have no problem most of the time, since the river is usually bone dry. But we were heading along the mountain route so we could see Bent's old fort. Unlike many other forts in the West, Bent's old fort was not established as a military station, but as a place where trade could take place. It was fortified as a way to protect itself if needed, and occasionally the military did use it, but its primary purpose was commerce. Native Americans, fur trappers, and trail travelers could all ply their goods here. This was also about the only place travelers could restock their supplies after leaving Council Grove in eastern Kansas. Among the many rooms was the dining hall, a blacksmith shop, and what we thought was storage for whiskey or some other spirit. Turns out these barrels stored gunpowder. But there was a room where people could quench their thirst. Repairs to wagons could be performed here, and there were stables for letting mules and cattle recuperate. They even had some there at the time we visited. They also had some animals the pioneers would not have experienced, as well as some others that they might have. After Bent's old fort, the trail headed more southerly, kind of paralleling the Picketwire River. Apparently the locals pronounce it Purgatory today, but the early French trappers would have pronounced it Purgatoire. It's not hard to imagine the English speakers that came later butchering Purgatoire into Picketwire. That's the current name of the canyon to which we were to take a detour. On our way to the canyon from La Junta, we started feeling like we were truly practicing social distancing. It was just us, and the cows, and the cactuses. In fact, once we left La Junta, we would not see another human being for about 18 hours. This is also where we started to enter the land of the cholla cactus. Rebecca decided to touch one and quickly learned that these are different than the prickly pears we have in Kansas. Good thing I brought tweezers. The canyon is located within Comanche National Grassland, but is not developed to any significant degree. At the entrance, there isn't much there, and the one restroom was locked. The area to the east of the entrance, on top of the mesa, is available for dispersed camping, but what that means is that there are no actual campsites. You just camp wherever you want as long as it's more than 100 feet from the rim of the canyon. Of course, you can't even tell a canyon is there until you get right up to the edge. This is where we had our first view of it. Our main purpose for taking this detour from the Santa Fe Trail was to check out the largest dinosaur track site in the world. There's also an old ruin of a Catholic mission called the Dolores Mission. Both of these sites are served by a 5.5-mile trail that starts at the Withers Trailhead. In my research for the trip, which means looking at Google Maps, I could see what appeared to be a trail heading from the mission up the side canyon. If this trail was usable, it could save us a lot of time and distance on our hike. Even leaving at dawn, it would be close to noon if we took the main trail by the time we got back, and the temperature was forecast to be almost 100 degrees that day. It seemed pretty obvious that there was a trail from the mission to at least here, and the trail also seemed to pick back up on the rim. So our plan was to stop here and to check if it seemed like it was possible to get from the rim to the canyon floor here. It wasn't a clearly marked trail at all, but it seemed like it shouldn't be a problem. So we were set. This was the spot where we chose to set up our dispersed camp. Starting from here would cut off half the time from our hike. If we left at dawn, we could take our time and easily be back by 10 o'clock or so. It shouldn't be too hot by then, right? With our camp set up, we went to bed in some of the quietest and darkest conditions I've ever been in. It actually scared Rebecca a little at first, but she ended up appreciating it. The next morning, just as planned, we hit the trail at dawn. As we worked our way down, we could quickly see where our rogue trail would meet up with the main trail. I've never heard anyone talk about this part of Colorado in a flattering way, but it really is quite beautiful. As the sun started rising, we noticed we could look right at it since there was so much haze in the air. Forest fires were burning in the mountains to the west, and the smoke was blowing east to where we were. Unfortunately, that made for a spectacular sunrise. We kept working our way towards the main trail and eventually reached the mission. All the mission is today is 3 walls and a few really cool headstones. As we joined the main trail, we headed toward the dinosaur track site. Before we got there, we stumbled onto this scene with a sign noting that the scapula of an apatosaurus was found here. This is just a replica of what was found, but it was a cool, unexpected bonus to our main goal. When we finally reached our main goal, a kiosk pointed the way. It was a very short walk further from the kiosk to the tracks themselves. Whether from Google Earth or from a sign at the kiosk, seeing the tracks from the air makes the site all the more impressive. Hundreds of footprints, slightly bigger than elephant-sized and made by apatosauruses, can be seen dotting the rocks alongside the river. In addition to the tracks made by apatosauruses, formerly known as brontosauruses, the part of the site on the north side of the river also contains tracks made by allosauruses, which are similar to T-Rexes. but by far the most numerous tracks are from apatosauruses. Most of the tracks are found in the big slab of rock on the south side of the river. Sometimes the river has enough water in it that you would have to wade through it to get to the tracks. But it was dry all the way across in sections when we were there, with just pools of water here and there. We ate a breakfast of trail mix and beef jerky at the track site and then headed back. Along the trail, both out and back, we saw a wide variety of critters. On the trail itself, we saw insects and evidence of what mammals ate, and the tracks of a mammal that might have left the evidence. This was one of a few badger tracks we saw. Alongside the trail were a variety of wildflowers and more insects that depended on them. We also saw a few lizards, including this whiptail. When we got back to the mission, we headed back up the side canyon, worked our way back up to the campsite, and said goodbye to Picketwire Canyon. It was already starting to get hot when we got back around 10 o'clock, so we were glad this rogue trail worked out. Leaving the canyon, we worked our way down dirt roads to the town of Pass, where we rejoined the Santa Fe Trail. It wasn't until we were back on the highway that we started seeing a few people in cars. We stopped at a Walmart in Trinidad for an air mattress since our foam pads weren't quite adequate the night before. Then we drove over Raton Pass and on to the town of Cimarron, New Mexico. From Cimarron, we left the Santa Fe Trail for good. We would end up in Santa Fe in a few days, but by a route that took us around the Enchanted Circle to Angel Fire, Red River, and Taos. Those areas are the topics of the next video.